Hi, class. I want to thank you again for bearing with me as I am still awaiting to be cleared by HR so that we can continue in the classroom. In the meantime, well, not actually in the meantime, this will be something that will be set up throughout the rest of the semester, but I developed a YouTube channel as a way for us to communicate and a way for you to gain course information. I'll be uploading a series of lectures for you, as well as directions on some assignments to do to upload to D2L. I want to mention that I will be available on Mondays and Wednesdays during class time. That's Mondays and Wednesdays, not on Fridays, but Mondays and Wednesdays during our regular standard class time. That's 8 a.m. to 8:50. If you have any questions or concerns or need clarification for anything, you can also reach me during my regular office hours as well, which are posted on my office door and the, the the door to get into my office, like the double doors to get into my office. So hopefully between that and Remind and the YouTube, we will be able to stay up to date until we're able to resume in the classroom. So I wanted to do a lecture on, I mentioned to you guys that I noticed in the book that the theories that we will be reviewing are learning about come from the Eurocentric model. And I thought that it would be beneficial to you for us to explore other points of views so that you can keep those other points of views in mind as we are learning the theories that we're going to be learning in the class. In D2L right now, you will see an assignment for chapter 2, which is Sigmund Freud. And in that, I believe, I think I mentioned to you guys that I don't have access to D2L. So the assignment in D2L is a generic assignment, but I was able to see what was in D2L from someone else's account. And if I recall, the assignment is asking you to like, I think, write a brief summary of your what you learned about Sigmund Freud, or I can't even remember exactly what the assignment is. I'm going to kind of alternate or modify that assignment, and I'll know that I'm doing that so that when I finally do get access to D2L, you will be graded according to the modification, not exactly how it's worded in D2L. And again, I know there can be a lot of confusion because we're not meeting in the classroom. So if you have any questions about what I'm saying, please come by my office during our class time or during my office hours. So let's get started. All right, so there are other points of views outside of the theories that we're going to learn or that will be discussed in the textbook. And I think if we were to divide those theories into sections, I would say we can divide them into an Eastern philosophy and a Western philosophy. And an Eastern philosophy is more universal, where you see yourself as interconnected to the world around you. There's this saying called Ubuntu, I am because we are. And so there's this sense of community that I'm not just in it for myself. Like, what I do can benefit my community as well. And so there's this universal ideal of self. There's also the soul and the intellect. And so there's not just this notion that it's all about my knowledge, right? And accumulating all of this knowledge, but I in the Eastern philosophy, the ideal of self is that I am a soul too, you know, that I am a spirit. And so my spirit contains wisdom, and my spirit contains understanding on how to use the knowledge, how to use the logos. There's this interrelated, our oneness, like I was saying, with the universe, and when I mean with the universe, I mean not just with human beings, but with nature, with the elements, with animals. There's this interconnectedness, right? That you realize that you are one of many. And so with that, there's harmony and unity, and the ability to adapt to external change, because you're always keeping in mind that you are not just here as an individual. Versus the Western philosophy, which is what most of us are accustomed to and know because we're raised in it, is in individualism. And individualism, not so much as just solo, but individualism as, okay, I have this family unit that I'm born into, the mother, father, sister, brother, and that is my only concern. Like, and we're just isolated from the universal world. And so most of what the view of self is based on that family unit, or the extension of that family unit, like your grandparents or whatnot. There is a strong, there's a strong, what's the word I'm looking for? Emphasis placed on knowledge and accumulating of knowledge and gaining knowledge. There is the separate body, mind, and spirit, or body, mind, and soul. Like they're separate parts with separate responsibilities. And it's the goal of self to master and control that, right? And control how the body, mind, and spirit interacts in the reality. So that's pretty much like the difference between Eastern and Western philosophy. And like these two philosophies can have or play an impact on how one would view themselves. And so I want you to keep this in mind as we begin to go through the chapter and learn about the different theories. So we know the chapter 2 begins with Sigmund Freud, right? So as you are reading through chapter 2, keeping in mind, like, which philosophy do you see in his view of self? Because his view of self is how he actually sees others, right? You know, we talked about how I see myself is how I actually see others. And so his theory on personality comes from his theory of himself, if that makes sense. And so as you are reading about him, and draw some conclusions about, does it seem like he is placing the emphasis, or is his view based on an Eastern philosophy, or is his view of self based on a Western philosophy? I also wanted to make note about the Indigenous point of view. And you'll notice as I go through the Indigenous point of view that a lot of the view of self is based more on the Eastern philosophy way. I'm not sure if any of you have taken world history or even remember what you learned in world history at that time, but we know that mankind began on African soil, right? And then from African soil, migration happened, and people moved from Africa into Asia, and then from Asia into, I guess you could say, all parts of what we know as the world, right? And so Eastern philosophy was that Eastern philosophy originated, or that way of thinking actually originated in Africa. And then as people migrated, they took it with them. And so when I speak about indigenous point of view, I'm not only talking about Native Americans in North America. I am speaking of indigenous people across the globe before colonization and imperialization happened. And so indigenous point of view, they believe in spirits. And what I mean by that, I'm not gonna probably go in this order, but they believe in spirits that come from the universal God. And so they believe that there is one God, God meaning power, God meaning life force, the creator, the giver of all that we see in the universe. And from that one God, or that one life force, comes many spirits. And so they see in spirits as the elements, the elements meaning water, air, fire, earth. Each, and a spirit meaning it has the life force in it. It has God in it. So therefore it has spirit in it. It has spirit meaning that it has logos, understanding and wisdom of what it's supposed to do. And I guess you can call that the DNA, like our DNA has within it the knowledge and understanding and wisdom of what it's supposed to do. For example, a cucumber seed, the logos is it's aware that it's supposed to grow to become a cucumber. It understands how it needs to grow and the wisdom of what needs to happen. So that's what I mean by spirits. They believe in the female and male energy. So they do not see God as just this masculine force, but it's female and masculine in one. They believe in the collective. They believe in ancestors, and there's a lot of reverence to ancestors, and they believe that ancestors are guides in the world for them, and they believe in the afterlife. And afterlife, of course, is when one has, I guess, this journey of life is to become. To learn how to become a master of your higher self, I guess, in a way. And so from that, you're able to become an ancestor that will then guide the next generation on. So this is just a brief overview of the indigenous point of view. I encourage you to to make yourself aware of global points of views. I think it's important if we can understand how people view self, because it helps us when we're working with one another. And it also helps us with, I think we had talked about this when we were talking about culture, right? Like the more that I can learn about the world around me, the more I can learn about myself. So when I was talking about indigenous point of view, I was also including, I guess maybe I should have worded it a globalist point of view, because I was kind of combining everyone into that group. But I did want to carve out some known psychologists that are focused their studies on the African-centered point of view. And if you are interested, this is their references and their information to explore more about how their theories that they have come up with the view of self. Most of their models that they have developed correlate with what I was sharing with you in the previous slide on indigenous points of views. I am not as familiar with the last two, but I am very familiar with Wade Noble's and Naeem Akbar's Black psychology. I've attended some seminars that Wade Noble has conducted, and I've read some of Naeem Akbar's books. And of course, when we get back into the classroom, my goal is that we can kind of expand a little bit more on some of these views that we're talking about, right? Where we can dissect the theorists that we will be learning about from the book and kind of analyze their theory compared to the other points of views that we're talking about in this presentation. So of course, religion plays a big part in how we view ourselves. And if you notice, I put the top three, what I would consider the three major religions that kind of birthed each other. Judaism birthed Christianity, and Christianity birthed Islam. And these are the top three monolithic gods, even though I think it's, I'm sorry, gods, religions. Even though I think it's kind of interesting that they tend to only consider these monolithic religions when there are a lot of religions like Hinduism and Buddhism and Yoruba, which is a West African religion, and Voodoo is another West African religion. They also believe in one God. I guess the difference between the two that I would say is that there is the belief in one God, and of that one God are many gods. So if I had to explain it in a practical way, there's like the capital G God, and then there's the lowercase g gods, versus the monolithic major three, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, only believes in the one God. And then of course, with Christianity, there's the Trinity. And so the top three, are very heavy in the patriotic system. And so like that patriotic system plays a role in our view of ourselves, how a female views themselves and how a male views themselves. Hinduism and Buddhism focus is their focus is more on, they're very similar. I guess if I had to divide the two, because I don't want to go too far in depth about religions, because this is not religion of psychology course. So if I had to break them down, the top three would be geared more toward a Western point of view, a Western philosophy, and the bottom two, Hinduism and Buddhism, would be more of an Eastern philosophy or point of view. And so again, sidebar, will make this presentation or this PowerPoint available to you in outline form. I will upload it to Remind. So when you go back and look through it, you will notice, you can make note of the Western philosophy and point of view, and how that plays a role in the view of self, right? And how that can intertwine with one's religion. And the Hinduism and Buddhism point of view, that is very much similar to the Eastern philosophy point of view, and how that plays a role in one's view of self. So that's the end of the slide. What I would like for you to do is, as you are reading over chapter 2, and reading about Sigmund Freud's and his psychoanalytic approach on the theory of self, while you are reading that, to compare it to the other points of views that I highlighted in this presentation. Compare it to, if it's the Western point of view, compare it to the Eastern. If you find that it's the Eastern point of view, compare it to the Western. Comparing it to the religions, which religion which religion did Sigmund Freud come from? What was he raised in? And how did that play a role, or how did that influence his theory on personality? In our first presentation that we did, when we were talking about the self, and we were talking about all of the different aspects that make us who we are, like culture, family of origin, We had talked about religion, right? We talked about social. So as you are reading about Sigmund Freud and his theory and approach, remembering those as well as your foundation in studying, how he came up with his theory. Because the things that we have talked about before all play a role in how I developed my view of self, and how I see myself influences how I see others. Once you are done reading over chapter 2, and utilizing this presentation that will be available for you and the previous presentation, writing a short paragraph, just with a summary of um, your point of view on Sigmund Freud's theory. Do you agree with it or disagree with it? Why or why not? What do you think were his influences as he developed his theory of personality? How do you think his religion played a role, or his family of origin? When we talk about family of origin, we're talking about like where he was born and raised. How did the philosophy that he comes from impact his theory on personality? And once you will complete that paragraph, and then I think you should be able to submit it to D2L. If not, I think you should be able to, I'm assuming you should be able to email it in D2L, even though I don't have access yet. The class is still up. So I think you should be able to email it at least into D2L. And then once I have access, I'll grade it from there. Again, if you have any questions about anything that I discussed today in this lecture, if you have any questions just about how we are moving forward until we are back in the classroom, please do not hesitate to come by my office during my office hours or during our class time on Monday or Wednesday. I hope that you have a blessed day.